we as a user, we as a spatial designer, has a voice there, and we need to craft the type of future where we think how technology will play a role and how technology will influence us.
Business of Architecture, episode 335. Hello, and welcome back, Architect Nation. I'm Enoch Sears, and this is the show where you'll discover tips, strategies, and secrets for building an architecture practice that lets you do your best work more often. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture's step-by-step business training program for architects that shows you how to structure your practice so you can focus on doing your best work instead of being bogged down with the complexity of running a business. Build the business that you need to do the work that you want. Discover more by going to businessofarchitecture.com/smart to discover more about the Smart Practice method. Today's show is also sponsored by Layer App, the flexible database for architects that makes it easy to view and share photos, files, and project data right in Revit. Get a completely free 14-day trial to go check it out by visiting layer.team/BOA. That's layer, LAYER.team, TEAM/BOA. Our guest today is Ren Yee, the head of innovation strategy and forecasting at UNStudio. He is also the head of design strategy at UNSense. UNStudio is an international architectural design network with 4 full-service international offices in Amsterdam, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Frankfurt. You may have seen their work featured on outlets such as ArchDaily, Architizer, and others. Welcome, Ren, to the Business of Architecture podcast.
Thank you, Enoch. Pleasure to be here.
So you have 2 titles that I introduced you as. Number one, there's UNSense, and there's also UNStudio. Would you describe to me what these 2 entities are, their differences, and the meaning of them?
So, as you introduced UNStudio already, we are a practice that started in 1988. Our focus was architecture. We started as an architecture and mainly looking at design as well. So Ben Van Berkel and Caroline Boss started that back then. And over the time, we evolved in different scales. As a design practice, we expanded into the scale of urban, architecture, interior, product, and even now consultancy, speculative and strategic consultancy, which is a unit we call the Futures, and I head the Futures team. And through those years, we do a lot of projects that interest us, so we are very excited about those projects and very lucky enough to be involved in those groundbreaking projects. For example, Mercedes-Benz Museum, Erasmus Bridge, Arnhem Central Stations, and all these projects are very exciting for us. And over the years, we started to realize that there's so much more that we can do as an architect. And now, especially with the fourth industrial revolution, every industry asks themselves, what can technology do? What is technology changing in our scope, in our work that we do, as well as on the effect of technology in the work that we do. For the people, the effect on the people, the user, and the environment. So Ben Van Berkel started to think, we thought together, and how can we expand that further? And therefore, we created an technology-oriented sister company called UNSense, and that's where we looked into foregrounding technology in the design. So we look into how technology would change the use, the typology of space, the city that we live in. And now, especially with so much data-oriented, data-driven design, to understand what can we get out more of the data, how would that serve a better design, a better use of space, and so on. So in this case, for your listeners' context, I used to be an architect. I started as an architect more than a decade ago with UNStudio, and hence doing very interesting project with really good, interesting group of people in UNStudio. We started to realize that there's so much more on a strategic side, and kind of like we receive a brief, we design the brief, we try to challenge the brief as much as we can. But no matter how much you push the boundary, there are a limitation in those boundaries in the brief. There's already set before it was given to an architect. And we've noticed that there's so much impact of the things that we've built. And therefore, to really make a bigger change in the brief, in order to have a better impact that we want to deliver, we have to go upstream. So, and then that's when I started to branch out a little bit more from architect. And now I use past tense. I would say I was an architect. And then we now go into more upstream influence, helping cities to see how can they help the city to transition in the climate crisis, in the social inequality crisis, in the health issues that we face today. How can we, as a designer, what role do we play in creating a better brief or finding a different angle of what design and architects can do? So that's when I start to reach out. So just for the context, I was an architect and I'm now stepping away. And from that futures, it starts to ask a lot of questions. And long story short, now we have a sister company, UNSense as well, foregrounding technology. So it's a little bit of a context of who we are. And especially in this context, what do I do?
Ren, can you give me some examples of what you mean by going upstream? What would be an example project that you've been involved in that can help us understand what you're talking about?
That's a very good question. For example, in our team, we were asked by Amsterdam municipality to create the Amsterdam Smart Mobility 2025 program. And this is something that goes into influencing policies, influencing maybe how municipality involve partnership with companies, with researchers, with citizens. So in order to, especially when you're trying to integrate technology into built environment that has so much impact, it would change the public transportation, it would change the road infrastructure. It's a long-term process. And hence, they start with a framework. We started with a white paper. So we were engaged with them. We engaged with their full team, the CTO of Amsterdam team, what they call the CTO. Actually, they're in charge of bringing technology into the municipality and across into all the departments. We started with a white paper. Then we craft out a program, what it could be. And from the program, we work together with stakeholders within the municipality themselves, and create a new program, like the next program, what to do from 2019, back a year ago, up until 2025. So that's a very good way of influencing the built environment. We don't want to just get the brief, but we want to be in the process because it involves so many people, it involves so many stakeholders, crafting something that is not there yet. So hence, that program was interesting for politicians not only to engage with the citizen, but also in this case to create a support for the program in order for citizens to feel that they're part of it, that they could also adapt and adopt a smart mobility solution for 2025.
And what would the work product of that look like? Help me understand what the actual deliverables would be in a situation like that.
It was very process oriented. So we had to, the deliverables it's many formats. So we engaged over a year. So we designed the program and the process together with them. And then once the program and process is designed, we start to engage. We bring in expertise from all around the world. And to share expertise from municipality, expertise from the business themselves, citizen representative, and research. So the quadruple helix. And the process is super important. The engagement process, bringing in knowledge, understanding the impact, understanding the policies. And then at the end of those process, we summarize what are the best steps forward? What are the visions that collectively everyone agreed upon? And then we created a report. So the report does not show the full extent of what we've done, but the report is very important to show a milestone and also to frame the visions that all the stakeholders have agreed upon. So the report marks the next step. So that was a indeed an ongoing process. You can see the report online from the municipality's website.
Go ahead.
Another example, actually, because that is one way of trying to see how we go upstream. Another extreme upstream example is our work with Hyperloop. So we all know there's many companies today starting up and trying to make a dream, a vision successful. So it's both technological. There's a lot of technological innovation that the many companies are doing, but there's also a lot of political acceptance, and also there's a lot of these technology that is not clear yet. It might affect the aviation industry, it might affect the landscape, it might affect the existing train station. So this idea is an abstract idea. Everyone tried to make it a reality. And we all know that the Hyperloop technology promised a lot of great potentials to combat a lot the challenges that we have today. So less reliance on aviation, on short haul travel. The speed, it would change the way we relate to spaces. It would change also maybe our relationship with logistics. The cargo, for example, will go much faster at very low environmental impact, because it consumes electric that you can be renewable electricity, for example. So our involvement was interesting. I think one of the most well-known Hyperloop companies, Hyperloop One Virgin, that I think everyone kind of knows that, especially from the States. But there's another interesting one. When Elon Musk announced the first Hyperloop challenge, and the winning team is TU Delft, Delft Technological University of Delft. And the four students who won, they spun off a company to call themselves Hard Hyperloop. And from very early on, we were their partner together with big companies like Tata Steel, BAM. BAM is a big Dutch construction company. We were helping them to formulate this vision. We're trying to say, if this technology were to come, how does it impact the city? How does it impact our behavior, travel pattern, and so on? And what is most interesting is, in fact, the political support. That's also quite interesting. So we were involved from day one. We designed, actually, we envisioned the transportation hub, the Hyperloop hub of the future. But within the process, we were involved in helping to bring in the ministry, the support from the Dutch ministry. So we were also involved in that angle. So that's also going really upstream onto a technology that is not there yet, but we're trying to anticipate, try to help such a positive technology to realize such a positive technology. So this is also going quite extreme upstream.
Beautiful example. Ren, what are the challenges involved in going upstream in terms of branding the company? Because typically architecture firms and, if clients would see your past, they would sort of put you into a box of, this is what an architecture firm does. They're going to do the planning. They're going to do the design. What were the challenges involved in actually letting clients know that, no, we're interested in doing this other kind of work. We want to do the strategy work, the innovation work, the upstream work?
Yeah. So our main focus, when I say main, I mean majority of our work still involve more traditional practice of architecture. So what we do is that we add on a different perspective towards how we as architects approach a project. So it could be a mixed-use project, it could be a university campus, it could be a master plan, but because we pride ourselves in the network, UNStudio stands for United Network. We pride ourselves with the network that we have built around us, the network of expertise, the network of researcher. We think that we need to engage such a network, create a platform whereby these group of people can come together and talk about and think and design a product that we want to be as future-proof as possible. And hence that is quite an easy entry. So we do tell them that we need to bring in the best opinion from different industry. For example, we work with neuroscientists as well. A couple of projects we've engaged neuroscientists to talk about the impact on behavior. How does architecture nudge behavior? What are the clear impact, or what are the impact that you can't measure, but it actually does have impact on your brain activity, on your mood. So we also engage in those people. So we engage in this diverse group to make a product better. That is not to say that's the only thing we do. So depending on that client, because some clients are open to revisit their brief. So they're open to say, I really like what you guys are doing. I like how you guys are approaching it. If you guys have a way to improve the product even better, what would you do? So that's when the strategic unit comes in and said, we can just quickly have a look at it and see what we can do within this. But from that engagement onwards, it means that our client knows we are able, especially when we bring the idea across. It has to be important that the idea is integrated into the design and actually proven at the end. That's important. So once the client sees that, then I think clients today will start to realize that setting a good brief is important. So then it means that they need to know who they need to engage, and therefore the opportunity becomes, they present itself to us.
And how did the firm make that transition? Because it's one thing to have a brief and go back and say, we can look at this in a different way and then start to work on forming the brief. But it's another thing, like you said, to be upstream, maybe before the brief is even developed, and they're reaching out to you as innovators, as people who are going to be involved more holistically. What was it that allowed that transition to actually happen?
I think having the right people on the client side, which is happening already in what we have observed. The client today have very diverse type of teams. So they don't not only look at how things should be built in the most cost-effective and respecting the time. They do have quite interesting people sitting on the other side that would say, "Oh, is this our best thing that we can do? What does the future bring us? Is this an old conventional way of looking at housing? What else does housing need?" So they do have these people having on that side, which ask really good questions, and therefore present themselves. They basically ask themselves, like, who else can we bring into the consortium to make this a reality? So that's one transition we saw. The other one probably is on the issues that we're facing today, like COVID-19, and it's a backdrop for so many things that needs to be fixed to come up. So social inequality, climate challenges, all of these are now surfacing. So indeed, this is also a good moment whereby people start to question, like, we have a brief, we have to do this project. How valid is this project in this context right now? Who shall we talk to make this project to be the right project that we want to see built in the next years and to live in for the next decades to come? So those are the two transitions that I've noticed.
Got it. Thank you. Talk to me about the expanding role of architect. We kind of discussed this before the interview, but the idea that architects don't need to be, let's just say they have a very diverse skill set that can be used in a lot of different ways. What are your thoughts on that expanding role now and in the future?
I think, in the architecture industry, it is comprises of many type of architects, as we know. Some architects are great project managers, amazing project managers. Some architects are great at detailing. Some architects are great conceptual, creating concepts. And it's not to say that all of us needs to expand our practice. So I think there are a lot of specialization in architecture industry that we need to keep. But I do think there are also a growing group of architects who feel that the way architects approach a problem, so maybe in different fields they call it the design thinking, or the way architects can look at the problem more holistically. Maybe the architects who are, because our products are long time span, it needs a long time span, and the impact of what we do is even longer. So maybe then the architects also have the ability to see in a long term. And as in our architecture practice and training, basically, we also talk about history. We also, even though we might be focusing on the history of architecture alone, but the fact that we are also obsessed with philosophy and history means that we're able to look backward as well. So I think that's one of the key strengths of architects that we are playing up more, that we need to look forward, we need to look backward, forecast and backcast, in order to come back to what we do and see what in this task that I have right now, with this group of clients that I have right now, working in this brief that I'm facing right now, what type of questions we need to throw in, what type of, which of these themes we need to put our fingers on, play up themes that we think the clients are not talking about, circularity, sustainability, they're not talking about. So we also have that. Architects are also well-traveled and well-read. So these are also what it's not really in our deliverable, in our free proposal, so to speak. But I think we should not undermine that skill set. We need to play up more. And I think this is one of them. And I think the other thing is that I think architects now are also being many architects are also entrepreneurial. So we also think about business. It's either that we think about our business in architecture, or we also know the impact of businesses or economic impact of our development. So maybe that is also something that we should play up more. How do we merge in this entrepreneurial and architecture? And we could start to diversify much more. We could create products that could be part of architecture industry, construction industry, products that produce, positive impact. So these two things, this whole idea of entrepreneurial, I think we also need to embrace much more, which I think your business of architecture is a lot about that too, right?
It is. That's what we're encouraging our listeners to do here, is to think entrepreneurially about their business. So I'm excited and very happy that you brought up that point. Now, you mentioned at the beginning of our interview that UNStudio has done things like product development, has done some other entrepreneurial products. Is that something that UNStudio is going to continue?
Yeah, absolutely. So UNSense is a very good example of our entrepreneurial spirit. We think that within the industry itself, we should be able to not only bring positive impact, but to have a commanding power in a tech industry, for example. We know that technology is encroaching into physical space. It's encroaching into our digital life, our life itself digitally, as well as space, how space function, all the sensors are about reading spaces, digital twin models about simulating real physical space in a digital realm, and so on. So we think that on that note, we should step in and really make our mark in that direction. So therefore, UNSense is something that we spun off. And along that line, what we also do is in UNStudio, we conduct research. So we always UNStudio always operate in the intersection of research, speculation, and applied. And in this case, the research, one of the research that we've done was in partnership with a Dutch research institute and a printing company in Netherlands. And we were trying to see how construction, how a building, a role of a building can help in the climate crisis. How can we reduce a dependency on greenhouse gases? And how do we create a little bit of transition of more energy neutral building? So the research started from an architect's perspective. We created those research together with them. And in the end, it became a company. It's called Solar Visual. We created a printable facade modules that has PV cells built in it, because we in the research we've noticed that in a dense environment of a city, the roof area where PV cells are normally on are very limited. And there's a lot of potential on the facade themselves, because they basically receive a lot of sunlight across the day. But there's no product there. There's no product in the market that shows a product that a designer would use, for example. Most of them look quite, very optimized for efficiency only, but there's no aesthetic value in it. And there's no system on the facade that has that yet. So in the end, we spun off a company. So that company is called Solar Visuals, and we're moving in that direction as well. So there's another example. It's called Reset. We were asked by Milan to talk about the future of workspace. So they were expecting us to design the future of work, but instead of talking about the future of work, we were trying to address the important issue here, which is stress at work. So in the end, we created together with a neuroscientist, one of the projects that we engaged in neuroscientists, we created a pod that uses a biometric sensing to understand your response to the environment. And then the environment itself that helps you address and first understand that you're having stress to measure it. And second of all, how do you eliminate the stress or reduce the stress? So working with the neuroscientists, they tell us that some people prefer to reduce stress actively. So like throwing dishes on the plate or punching something. And some of them actually reduce stress in a more introverted by meditative and being by yourself. So that's depending on your way you address stress. And physical environment has impact on that. The color, what the physical environment allow you to do, the sound, and so on. So we created 2 pods in the end for people to try that out. But at the end of it became also a product. So there's also a direction whereby a research addressing a relevant issue there might be a gap in the market that needs such a product. So we are also very interested in continuing in that endeavor, in that direction in UNStudio and UNSense.
Got it. And you've told us a lot about UNStudio. Tell me more about UNSense and what's your role in that company? What does UNSense do?
So UNSense, as I said before, we as a bunch of architects, actually I'm the only architect there right now. We have now diversified a group of people in UNSense. We believe that coming into using technology, foregrounding technology in the space that we design. So we understand what is the use, how do we live in the future? What are the physical space and built environment that we will need, and what does technology impact the built environment? Also, what does the built environment impact the technology? And basically step into that domain, step into that realm. So that's what we do there. And it started 2 years ago, and it is a very interesting journey because every client that we spoke to, there is a gap there too. People realize that technology seems to be out of our control, out of our hand, and under the control of a few tech giants. The way it would change our way we socialize, the way we move around the city, the way we engage with information. And now these tech giants are also stepping into physical space. So Kevin Kelly talked about the 3 era of internet. The first era of internet is when all documents are made machine readable. That's when Google is a gatekeeper. The second era of internet is when all behavior is made machine readable. That's where Facebook is a gatekeeper, and the whole social media realm. So he's speculating the third era of internet is what he called the mesh, is where all objects, space, and activity in space will be made machine readable. And this is all the IoT things that we're talking about, Internet of Things. Everything is connected to physical space. Everyone knows if a space is occupied, what happens in the space, and so on. And that is changing the world that we know today. For example, Airbnb is part of what they do to connect you to beautiful spaces to travel is also to look into empty residential area. So that's another way of looking at things. So if you have technology that would understand there are empty residential area, imagine what Airbnb can do in the next step. So to fight for the issue, to combat the problem of lack of space, lack of housing, for example. So technology can change to that extent, and I think your viewers knows much more example of that. So that's where UNSense comes in and think about in those domain what we can do. So I play the role in design strategy. I head the design and strategy team there, and we have a team of UX designers. We engage with in the long term data scientists, neuroscientists, software developers, in order to merge both hardware and software together in space. So as we also know today, physical space are much more run by software. So this whole MIT has a book about it called the coded space, how space in fact are determined by software that we don't realize. Airport is a perfect example. Your entire journey through the airport is entirely dictated by software. So imagine now if this is a case whereby your home, your workspace, your offices, which are already happening, imagine that much more entangled between the digital and the physical world. What would that mean? So therefore, in UN sense, we want to task ourselves to say, instead of giving this influence led by tech company who are engineers, I think we also have a voice. We as a user, we as a spatial designer has a voice there, and we need to craft the type of future where we think how technology will play a role and how technology will influence us. So I'm stepping a little bit into ethical discussion as well. And I think that we all know that the influence will be quite permanent. And therefore, I think, at least here in Europe, there's a very big discussion. And a lot of different industry are talking about how can we take control and what are the things that we democratically can decide how technology will influence the space and influence our life. So in a very long answer to your questions, what we do in UN sense.
Great. Now, Ren, it's one thing to have ideas, to have innovation, to have strategy, to have network and have teams. It's another thing to have the capital to be able to launch these entrepreneurial ventures. So I'm just curious that the capital to run UN Sense, did that come from a primary commission that came in and then bankrolled that venture? Is it, if you feel comfortable sharing, was it money that was taken from UNStudio that funded that venture? I'm just curious because I know that doing startups is very cash hungry. So I'm imagining this cash has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Because we believe in the vision so much, UNStudio is investing into this. And I think like many other business that we do, we want to make sure that the product or the services that we believe that we bring value to the society, that will be reciprocated by with demand. So basically, with more people saying that that's a good idea, I think that's what the services that we need, then that should fund the next round of our endeavor. So basically, that's a very conventional way of looking at things, how business runs. So you first have to invest on it. If you have a wealthy aunt, even better. But in this case, I think it's we don't have a wealthy aunt. But because we believe in the larger vision of UNStudio, we think that this is the best way to actually have an impact. Hence, our commitment to the company.
Beautiful. Ren, how can people go to find out more about your work at both UNStudio and UN Sense?
You can log on to our website. Go on. I think in the website we try to update as much as we can. It doesn't have all the utmost latest project as fast as we would like to update on the website. You can go on our social media, on our LinkedIn page, the Instagram page, or you can reach out to me if there's any interesting questions or dialogues or engagement the viewer wants to talk about.
Great. Thank you. Ren Yee, thank you for joining us here on the Business of Architecture podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
And that's a wrap. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Practices, the world's leading step-by-step business training program that's helped more than 103 architecture firm owners structure their existing practice so the complexity of business doesn't get in the way of their architecture. Because you see, it's not your architecture or design skills that's holding you back. It's the complexity of running a business, managing projects and people, dealing with clients, contractors, and money. So if you're ready to simplify the running of your practice, go to businessofarchitecture.com/smart to discover the proven, simple, and easy to implement smart practice method for running a practice that doesn't get in the way of doing exceptional architecture. Today's episode is also sponsored by Layer App. Layer App takes all of your project-related data, photos, and files and makes them accessible with the click of a button right in Revit. So let me tell you how this works. It took me a while to get the concept. Say that you go to a job site and you take a bunch of pictures. Now, you get back to the office with your camera loaded down with hundreds, perhaps even thousands of pictures, and now it's your job to organize them in a way that makes sense so you and other team members can easily find and use them later. What a nightmare. Now, imagine instead of wrestling with categorizing photos and renaming them and trying to organize them in folders, that the moment you took the photos on your smartphone, they were immediately linked to your Revit model where you or other team members could access them with the click of a button. This is what Layer App does. You can also link other project data like spec sheets, project notes, and anything else to elements right within Revit. So here are 2 reasons why I thought, as a listener, you'd want to try out Layer App. Number 1, if you currently work for a firm, the last thing you want to be working on is tedious work like categorizing and organizing project information. If you're a firm owner or principal, your firm could save thousands in staff time just by using this app, not to mention the convenience of having project data at your fingertips right when you need it. I hope this is a valuable resource for you. If you use Revit, Layer App is a must-have. Find out more and get a completely free 14-day trial at layer.team/BOA. It's layer, layer.team/BOA. And by the way, if you listen to episode 338, you can hear my interview with Zach Soflin, the founder and CEO of Layer App, the architect turned software developer who created the product. And get your free trial at layer.team/BOA. The views expressed on this show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment, except to help you conquer the world. Carpe diem.